I was standing at my desk on the third floor of TechFlow Solutions when Bradley Whitman's voice cut through the afternoon buzz like a knife. The CEO's face was crimson with rage as he stormed across the open office floor, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the polished concrete. Every conversation stopped. Every keyboard fell silent. 60 employees turned to watch as he planted himself directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his bitter coffee breath. "You are not a leader," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the exposed brick walls. "Your attitude problem ends today. You're fired. Pack your things and get out within the hour." The entire floor held its breath as I looked up at him, calmly smiled, and said simply, "Thank you." Then I turned toward my desk while my 7 team members stared in stunned silence. My hands remained steady as I opened my desk drawers, pulling out personal items I'd accumulated during 3 years at TechFlow. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while Bradley retreated to his glass-walled corner office, clearly satisfied with his public display of authority. My team clustered around adjacent workstations, their faces a mixture of shock and barely contained anger. James, our software architect with the prematurely gray beard, was the first to approach. At 35, he'd been coding for 15 years and commanded respect throughout the tech industry. "Rose," he whispered, glancing toward Bradley's office. "This is absolutely insane. He can't treat people like this." Sarah, our data analyst, rolled her chair closer. Her usually perfect ponytail hung slightly askew, and her brown eyes blazed with indignation. "I've been documenting his behavior patterns for months," she murmured, tapping her laptop screen. "The screaming matches the impossible deadlines, the way he humiliates people in meetings. This crosses every professional line imaginable." Marcus, our project coordinator, stood behind his standing desk with his arms crossed. His muscular frame, built from weekend rock climbing adventures, seemed coiled with tension. "Rose, I need you to know something. I've been planning to quit for weeks. 3 different companies have reached out to me through LinkedIn, all offering significant salary increases and better working environments." Diana, our quality assurance lead, abandoned her usual quiet demeanor. The woman who normally spoke in measured technical terms now spoke with raw emotion. "My cousin works in HR at Morrison Industries. They've been asking specifically about our team's availability. Apparently, Victoria Chen herself mentioned wanting to poach our entire operation." Trevor, our marketing specialist with the infectious laugh, wasn't laughing now. His usual casual attire of jeans and vintage band shirts seemed somehow more serious today. "Rose, I've been keeping records of every time Bradley contradicted himself in client meetings. Last week alone, he promised 3 different delivery dates for the same project to the same client." Patricia, our customer success manager, clutched a folder against her chest. At 42, she'd worked in client relations for 2 decades and understood business dynamics better than anyone. "The clients specifically request our team for their projects. They trust us, not the company. Bradley doesn't realize that relationships follow people, not corporate logos." Amber, our junior developer fresh out of college, spoke with surprising conviction for someone just 23 years old. "My professors always said that toxic leadership destroys innovation. I've learned more in the past 6 months working with Rose than I did in 4 years of computer science classes." As I placed my coffee mug and desk plant into a cardboard box, James stood up from his workstation. The motion was deliberate, almost ceremonial. He began gathering his personal items, family photos, his collection of programming books, his lucky rubber duck debugger that had helped him solve countless coding problems. Sarah followed suit, closing her laptop with a decisive snap. She'd always been methodical in her approach to data analysis, and now she applied that same systematic thinking to her resignation. Her desk had always been immaculate, and she maintained that precision as she organized her belongings. Marcus abandoned his standing desk setup, carefully packing his project management whiteboard markers and his collection of motivational quotes he'd printed and hung around his monitor. His movements were controlled but purposeful, like a climber preparing for a challenging ascent. Diana powered down her testing equipment, each action precise and final. Her quality assurance mindset extended to her personal organization, and she methodically ensured nothing important was left behind. Trevor gathered his marketing materials, including campaign mock-ups and client presentation materials he'd developed independently. His creative energy, usually channeled into brilliant advertising concepts, now focused on this moment of professional rebellion. Patricia collected her client contact information and relationship notes. Years of experience had taught her that business success depended on personal connections, and she wasn't leaving those relationships to deteriorate under Bradley's mismanagement. Amber packed her laptop bag with the enthusiasm of someone finally taking control of her career trajectory. Her recent graduation had filled her with optimism about the tech industry, and she refused to let Bradley's toxicity crush that spirit. The other employees and throughout the office watched in fascination as my team prepared to leave. Whispered conversations began spreading across different departments. Administrative assistants exchanged meaningful glances. Engineers paused their coding to observe the unfolding drama. Bradley remained in his office, occasionally glancing through the glass walls. His expression shifted between satisfaction and growing uncertainty as he watched not just me, but my entire team preparing to depart. James was the first to walk toward the elevator, his box of belongings balanced easily in his strong arms. His confidence in this decision radiated from his relaxed shoulders and steady pace. Sarah followed, her analytical mind already calculating the implications of this mass departure. She'd run the numbers on employee retention and company productivity, and she knew exactly what impact this would have on TechFlow's operations. Marcus strode toward the exit with the same determination he brought to managing complex projects. His leadership skills, honed through years of coordinating diverse teams, now guided him toward a better future. Diana walked with quiet dignity, her commitment to quality extending to this life decision. She'd tested this choice against every possible scenario and concluded it was the right path forward. Trevor's natural charisma drew attention as he moved through the office. Other employees watched him with curiosity, wondering if his departure signaled something larger happening at TechFlow. Patricia's decades of professional experience showed in her composed demeanor as she headed for the elevator. Her understanding of business relationships told her this was a strategic move, not just an emotional response. Amber brought up the rear, her youthful energy barely contained. She was excited about the possibilities ahead, viewing this as an adventure rather than a setback. As the elevator doors closed behind us, I realized that Bradley's attempt to humiliate me had actually revealed the strength of the team I'd built. These weren't just employees following their boss. These were professionals making independent decisions based on their values and career goals. The silence in the elevator was comfortable rather than tense. We'd all made the same choice for different reasons, but we were united in our belief that we deserved better treatment and more professional opportunities than TechFlow could offer under Bradley's leadership. The parking garage beneath TechFlow Solutions buzzed with unexpected activity as word of our departure spread through the building's internal communication channels. What happened next caught all of us completely off guard and revealed just how deeply Bradley's toxic management had poisoned the entire organization. Lisa Harrison, the accounting supervisor I'd worked with on budget reconciliations, hurried toward us as we loaded our belongings into various cars. Her usually immaculate business attire looked disheveled, and her normally controlled expression showed cracks of desperation mixed with relief. "Rose, wait," she called out, her heels echoing against the concrete walls. "I can't stay there anymore. Bradley's been forcing me to maintain 2 different sets of financial records for the past 8 months. One set shows our actual expenses and revenue, and another shows fabricated numbers that make our profit margins look impossibly good for investor presentations." Her confession hit like a physical blow. Lisa was known throughout the company for her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering ethical standards. If Bradley had corrupted her department, the implications were staggering. Kevin Martinez from Human Resources appeared next, practically jogging across the parking level. His typical friendly demeanor had been replaced by something that looked like barely contained panic, mixed with newfound determination. "I've been documenting harassment complaints that Bradley ordered me to bury," Kevin revealed, clutching a manila folder against his chest. 3 different women reported inappropriate behavior from senior management, and Bradley told me to lose the paperwork. He said dealing with those complaints would damage the company's reputation and stock value. George Patterson, the facilities manager, who'd always seemed unflappable, emerged from the stairwell looking more agitated than I'd ever seen him. His maintenance uniform was wrinkled, and his usually steady hands trembled slightly as he approached our group. "They've been cutting safety protocols to reduce operational costs." George disclosed, his voice heavy with guilt. The fire suppression system in the server room hasn't been properly maintained in over a year. The building's electrical systems are overloaded because Bradley refused to approve infrastructure upgrades. I've been falsifying inspection reports because he threatened to fire me if I documented the real conditions. More employees began trickling into the parking garage. Jennifer Walsh from the marketing department explained that Bradley had been instructing her team to make false claims about product capabilities in promotional materials. Robert Chen from customer service revealed that management had established quotas requiring representatives to deny valid warranty claims to improve profit margins. Angela Foster from the legal department shocked us all by admitting she'd been pressured to draft contracts with deliberately misleading language designed to trap clients in disadvantageous terms. Her legal training made her acutely aware of the ethical violations involved, and the stress had been eating at her conscience for months. By 6 o'clock that evening, 23 employees had submitted formal resignations. The building's security guards looked overwhelmed as they processed departure paperwork for nearly half the company's workforce. The remaining employees wandered the office floors in a state of shock, trying to comprehend how their workplace had disintegrated so rapidly. News of the mass exodus spread beyond TechFlow's walls. Someone had contacted local media outlets, and by 7:30 news vans from 3 different television stations were parked outside the building. Reporters approached departing employees seeking interviews about the unprecedented resignation event. Amanda Foster, an investigative journalist from Channel 7 News, managed to corner our group as we prepared to leave the parking garage. Her reputation for exposing corporate wrongdoing preceded her, and her presence suggested this story had implications beyond a simple workplace dispute. "Can you comment on the allegations of financial irregularities at TechFlow Solutions?" she asked her camera operator, capturing our responses. "We've received tips suggesting this mass resignation is connected to potential federal violations." The question caught us off guard. None of us had mentioned federal violations or legal issues. Amanda's inquiry suggested she possessed information we weren't aware of, and her confident demeanor indicated this story extended far beyond our workplace drama. Social media amplified the situation throughout the evening. Current and former TechFlow employees began posting about their experiences working under Bradley's leadership. The hashtag TechFlowExodus started trending locally as people shared stories of verbal abuse, unrealistic demands, and ethical compromises they'd witnessed or experienced. Bradley's response to the crisis demonstrated exactly why so many employees had lost confidence in his leadership. Instead of addressing the underlying issues or attempting damage control, he sent a company-wide email dismissing the departing employees as disloyal troublemakers who lacked commitment to TechFlow's success. The email backfired spectacularly. Remaining employees forwarded copies to local news outlets, and Bradley's tone-deaf response became evidence of his inability to comprehend the seriousness of the situation. His attempt to control the narrative only highlighted his disconnect from reality and his workforce's legitimate concerns. That night, I received dozens of phone calls and text messages from former colleagues, industry contacts, and even competitors expressing support for our decision. The technology community in our city was surprisingly small, and news of TechFlow's implosion spread quickly through professional networks. Several competing companies reached out directly expressing interest in hiring our team or contracting our services. The response suggested that our professional reputations had remained intact despite Bradley's attempts to undermine us, and that the broader business community viewed us as the victims rather than the perpetrators of TechFlow's crisis. By midnight, local news websites featured TechFlow's mass resignation as their lead story. The coverage painted a picture of systemic management failure and potential criminal activity, transforming what started as my personal humiliation into a public relations nightmare for Bradley and his remaining leadership team. The domino effect Bradley triggered by firing me publicly had revealed problems throughout his organization that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. His attempt to demonstrate his authority had instead exposed him as a leader who had lost control of his company through his own poor decisions and ethical shortcuts. The next morning brought revelations that transformed our understanding of everything that had happened at TechFlow. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen, still processing the previous day's events, when my phone rang with a call that would change my perspective on Bradley's behavior completely. Amanda Foster's voice carried an urgency that immediately grabbed my attention. Rose, I need to meet with you as soon as possible. I've been investigating TechFlow Solutions for the past 3 months as part of a broader story about government contract fraud in the tech industry. Your firing yesterday wasn't about your attitude. It was about what you were getting too close to discovering. Her words sent chills through me as I recalled the questions I've been asking about budget discrepancies and billing irregularities. Those seemingly routine inquiries had apparently triggered something much larger than I'd realized. We met at a coffee shop downtown where Amanda spread a collection of documents across our corner table. Her investigative work revealed a complex web of financial manipulation that went far beyond the accounting irregularities Lisa had mentioned in the parking garage. TechFlow has been systematically overcharging government clients for software development projects, Amanda explained, pointing to spreadsheets comparing contracted work with actual deliverables. They've been billing for premium developers while using junior programmers charging for custom code while delivering modified open-source solutions and claiming projects required twice as much development time as they actually took. The documentation was overwhelming. Amanda had obtained copies of internal emails through unnamed sources revealing conversations where Bradley and his senior management team discussed strategies for maximizing government contract profits through various forms of deception. Your questions about project budgets were getting too specific, Amanda continued. Bradley realized that someone with your access to operational data and client relationships could piece together the fraud scheme. Firing you publicly was his attempt to discredit you before you could become a problem for him. She showed me email exchanges where Bradley specifically mentioned concerns about my increasing curiosity regarding billing practices. In one message to his chief financial officer, he wrote that my questions were becoming dangerous to their operations and that they needed to find a way to remove me from projects involving government contracts. The scope of the fraud was staggering. Over the past 3 years, TechFlow had artificially inflated government contract billing by approximately $8 million through various deceptive practices. The money had been used to fund Bradley's expensive lifestyle, including a vacation home in the Hamptons and a collection of luxury vehicles. Amanda's investigation had uncovered connections between TechFlow's practices and a broader network of companies engaging in similar government contract fraud. Federal investigators had been building cases against multiple organizations, and TechFlow had become a focal point due to the scale of their operations and Bradley's increasingly careless approach to covering his tracks. The Federal Bureau of Investigation opened a formal investigation 6 months ago, Amanda revealed. They've been monitoring TechFlow's financial transactions, email communications, and client relationships. Your mass resignation yesterday created an opportunity for them to approach former employees as potential witnesses without tipping off current management. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code. Amanda nodded encouragingly as I answered, somehow knowing what this call would bring. Ms. Rose Thompson, this is Special Agent Michael Torres with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss your recent employment at TechFlow Solutions and your observations regarding the company's business practices. Agent Torres spoke with the measured professionalism of someone accustomed to conducting sensitive investigations. His request for a meeting wasn't surprising given Amanda's briefing, but hearing it directly from federal law enforcement made the situation feel dramatically more serious. During our phone conversation, Agent Torres explained that the FBI had been building a comprehensive case against TechFlow and several related companies. They'd identified me as someone with valuable insider knowledge about operational procedures and client relationships that could help them understand the full extent of the fraud scheme. Your questions about budget allocations and billing practices actually helped trigger our investigation, Agent Torres revealed. Our financial monitoring systems detected unusual patterns in TechFlow's government contract payments that coincided with your internal inquiries about project costs. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My routine diligence in questioning financial discrepancies had accidentally helped federal investigators identify criminal activity. Bradley's paranoia about my questions hadn't been workplace paranoia. It had been the justified fear of someone whose criminal enterprise was being inadvertently exposed. Amanda's documentation showed that several other TechFlow employees had also raised questions about billing practices over the past year. Each person who asked uncomfortable questions had been systematically marginalized, transferred to different projects, or eventually forced out through various forms of harassment and professional undermining. Bradley's public firing of you was actually a panic response, Amanda explained. He'd received word through industry contacts that federal investigators were asking questions about TechFlow's government contracts. He needed to remove you immediately because he was terrified that your access to project data would allow you to connect the dots he'd been desperately trying to keep separate. The mass resignation that followed my departure had created chaos in TechFlow's operations, but it had also provided federal investigators with unprecedented access to insider information. Nearly 24 former employees were now available to provide testimony about irregular practices they'd witnessed or been forced to participate in. Lisa's admission about maintaining dual accounting records was particularly valuable to investigators. Her documentation of falsified financial statements provided direct evidence of intentional fraud rather than simple accounting errors or oversight. Kevin's buried harassment complaints demonstrated a pattern of obstruction and cover-ups that extended beyond financial crimes. Bradley's instructions to suppress legitimate grievances showed consciousness of guilt and willingness to violate employment laws to protect his interests. George's falsified safety inspection reports revealed additional criminal liability related to building codes and worker safety regulations. His documentation of deliberately ignored maintenance issues could result in separate charges related to endangering employee welfare. As Amanda packed up her documents, she warned me that the investigation would likely intensify over the coming weeks. Bradley would probably attempt to discredit former employees' claim that any irregularities were the result of unauthorized actions by subordinates and portray himself as an innocent executive betrayed by dishonest staff members. Federal investigators want to meet with you next week, Amanda concluded. Your testimony could be crucial in establishing the timeline of when Bradley became aware that his fraud scheme was being discovered and how he attempted to silence potential witnesses. The drive home gave me time to process the magnitude of what had been revealed. My career setback had transformed into participation in a federal criminal investigation. Bradley's attempt to humiliate and silence me had instead positioned me as a key witness in bringing justice for crimes that extended far beyond workplace harassment. That evening, my former team members called to discuss the developing situation. Each of them was grappling with the realization that their workplace problems had been symptoms of criminal activity rather than simple management incompetence. James expressed relief that his documentation of Bradley's behavior now had legal significance rather than being merely workplace grievances. Sarah realized that her data analysis skills could help federal investigators understand the scope and methodology of the financial fraud. Marcus recognized that his project management records could provide crucial timeline evidence for prosecution. Diana, Patricia, Trevor, and Amber each possessed pieces of information that could contribute to the federal case. Diana's quality assurance documentation showed how legitimate work was misrepresented to clients. Patricia's customer relationship records demonstrated how clients were deceived about project specifications and deliverables. Trevor's marketing materials revealed false claims made to attract government contracts. Amber's development work showed how junior programmers were used while clients were billed for senior developer rates. By the end of the day, what had begun as my personal workplace crisis had evolved into something with implications for government contract integrity, federal law enforcement, and the accountability of corporate executives who believed they could operate above the law. Within 48 hours of my firing, the power dynamics surrounding our situation shifted in ways that none of us could have anticipated. The transformation began with a phone call that would fundamentally alter not just my career trajectory, but the entire landscape of the federal investigation into TechFlow's criminal activities. Victoria Chen, the CEO of Morrison Industries, contacted me directly on Wednesday morning. Morrison Industries was a billion-dollar government contracting firm specializing in infrastructure development, and they had been TechFlow's largest client for the past 2 years. Victoria's call caught me completely off guard, as I'd never spoken with her directly, despite managing projects for her company. "Rose, I need to be completely transparent with you." Victoria began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions involving millions of dollars. "Morrison Industries specifically requested your team for every project we contracted through TechFlow. Our internal quality assessments consistently showed that work completed under your supervision exceeded specifications and was delivered ahead of schedule." Her revelation was stunning. I'd assumed our client relationships were managed entirely through Bradley and his sales team. The discovery that Morrison Industries had specifically requested our team's involvement suggested that our professional reputation extended far beyond TechFlow's corporate structure. We've been monitoring the quality deterioration in TechFlow's deliverables over the past 6 months, Victoria continued. Projects not involving your team showed significant quality issues, missed deadlines, and communication breakdowns that were costing us both time and money. When we learned about your departure, we immediately began evaluating our contract options. Victoria explained that Morrison Industries was terminating their $12 million annual contract with TechFlow effective immediately. The decision wasn't just based on my firing, but on a comprehensive review of project quality and client service that had revealed systemic problems throughout Bradley's organization. We'd like to offer your entire team immediate employment as independent contractors working directly for Morrison Industries, Victoria proposed. The compensation package would be significantly higher than your TechFlow salaries, and you'd have complete autonomy over project management and technical decisions. The offer was extraordinary both financially and professionally. Victoria was essentially providing us with immediate financial security while removing us from the chaos surrounding TechFlow's legal troubles. Her proposal would allow us to continue working on familiar projects while distancing ourselves from Bradley's criminal activities. Before I could fully process Victoria's offer, Agent Torres called with information that added another dramatic dimension to our situation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation wanted to accelerate their timeline for approaching TechFlow witnesses due to evidence that Bradley was attempting to destroy documentation and intimidate remaining employees. We've obtained court approval for immediate witness protection protocols, Agent Torres explained. Your role in this investigation has become critical, and we're concerned about potential retaliation attempts. We'd like you to serve as a protected witness, which would provide legal safeguards and financial support during the investigation process. The witness protection offer wasn't the full relocation program associated with organized crime cases, but it included legal immunity, financial compensation for cooperation, and federal oversight of any attempts to interfere with my testimony or employment opportunities. Agent Torres revealed that my questions about budget discrepancies had actually provided federal investigators with their initial roadmap for understanding TechFlow's fraud scheme. My documentation of billing irregularities had helped them identify which government contracts involved fraudulent billing and which clients had been overcharged. Your insider knowledge of TechFlow's operational procedures is crucial for establishing criminal intent, Agent Torres explained. Bradley's public firing of you creates a clear timeline showing consciousness of guilt. He knew you were getting too close to exposing his activities, and his response demonstrates that he understood the criminal nature of his actions. The combination of Victoria's employment offer and the Federal Witness Protection Program created an unprecedented situation. I would be financially secure through Morrison Industries while contributing to a federal criminal investigation that could result in significant prison sentences for Bradley and his co-conspirators. My team members received similar opportunities as the investigation expanded. James was recruited by Victoria's technology department to lead software architecture for Morrison's internal systems. Sarah's analytical skills made her valuable to both Morrison Industries and federal investigators who needed help understanding TechFlow's complex financial manipulations. Marcus received offers from 3 different project management firms that had heard about our mass resignation and wanted to capitalize on our proven track record. Diana was approached by quality assurance consulting companies that recognized her expertise in developing testing protocols. Trevor's marketing background made him particularly valuable to companies looking to compete for government contracts that would likely become available as TechFlow's operations collapsed. Patricia's client relationship expertise was in high demand among firms hoping to capture TechFlow's abandoned accounts. Amber, despite being the youngest team member, received multiple offers from technology startups that valued her fresh perspective and her experience working under ethical leadership. Her enthusiasm for innovation made her attractive to companies building cultures based on integrity rather than profit maximization. The broader implications of Victoria's decision to terminate Morrison Industries' contract with TechFlow became clear over the following days. Other major clients began conducting their own reviews of TechFlow's performance and contract compliance. Federal investigators reached out to these clients, revealing the scope of the fraud investigation and encouraging them to examine their own experiences with Bradley's company. Within a week, TechFlow lost contracts worth over $25 million as clients either terminated agreements or declined to renew expiring arrangements. The financial impact was devastating for a company that was already struggling with the loss of nearly half its workforce and mounting legal expenses. Bradley's attempts to control the situation became increasingly desperate and erratic. He hired an expensive public relations firm to manage media coverage, but their efforts were undermined by continued revelations about the scope of his criminal activities and the number of former employees cooperating with federal investigators. The local business community began distancing itself from TechFlow and Bradley personally. Professional organizations revoked Bradley's memberships, and he was quietly removed from several nonprofit boards where he had served as a technology advisor. My transformation from a fired employee to a protected federal witness created opportunities that extended far beyond immediate employment concerns. Legal experts approached me about potentially writing a book about corporate fraud and whistleblower protection. Business schools expressed interest in having me speak about ethical leadership and the importance of questioning irregular practices. The situation that began with my public humiliation had evolved into something that positioned me at the center of a significant federal investigation, while providing financial security and professional opportunities that exceeded anything I'd experienced at TechFlow. By the end of that remarkable week, it was clear that Bradley's attempt to destroy my career had actually launched me into a position of influence and authority that I never could have achieved while working under his dysfunctional leadership. 2 weeks after our dramatic departure from TechFlow, my team and I established Sterling Solutions in a modern office space downtown, just 6 blocks from our former workplace. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that we were building something new and ethical while watching our former employer collapse under the weight of its criminal activities. Victoria Chen's contract with Morrison Industries provided the financial foundation for our new venture, but the opportunities extended far beyond that initial relationship. Word of our principled stand against corporate corruption had spread throughout the business community, creating demand for our services that exceeded our capacity to deliver. Within the first week of operations, Sterling Solutions received contract proposals from 4 additional companies. Hartwell Manufacturing wanted our team to develop inventory management software after learning about our reputation for delivering projects ahead of schedule and under budget. Coastal Engineering sought our expertise in creating client communication systems that prioritized transparency and accountability. Regional Medical Associates needed database integration services and specifically requested our team because of our emphasis on ethical business practices. North Point Financial, a mid-sized investment firm, approached us with an opportunity to develop fraud detection software. Their interest in our services was directly connected to news coverage about the TechFlow investigation. They wanted technology solutions created by people who had demonstrated real-world experience in identifying and reporting financial irregularities. The growth trajectory of Sterling Solutions exceeded every projection I'd made during my most optimistic planning sessions. We'd gone from unemployed former TechFlow employees to operating a consulting firm with over $40,000 in confirmed contracts and a waiting list of potential clients interested in our services. Former TechFlow employees continued reaching out seeking opportunities to join our expanding operation. The mass exodus from Bradley's company had created a pool of experienced professionals who were eager to work in an environment that prioritized integrity over profit maximization. Jennifer Walsh, the marketing specialist who had been forced to make false claims about product capabilities, brought valuable client relationship expertise and a deep understanding of ethical marketing practices. Her experience with Bradley's deceptive tactics made her passionate about developing honest communication strategies for Sterling Solutions. Robert Chen from customer service contributed knowledge about client support systems and warranty policies that protected both companies and customers. His frustration with being forced to deny valid warranty claims had motivated him to develop service protocols that prioritized customer satisfaction and long-term relationship building. Angela Foster's legal background became invaluable as Sterling Solutions navigated contract negotiations and compliance requirements. Her experience being pressured to draft misleading legal documents at TechFlow made her determined to establish transparent and fair business practices. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's case against TechFlow continued developing throughout this period, and the evidence provided by former employees strengthened the prosecution's position significantly. Agent Torres kept me informed about the investigation's progress, and each update revealed additional criminal activities that Bradley and his leadership team had been concealing. Bradley's response to the federal investigation demonstrated exactly why so many talented employees had lost confidence in his leadership. Instead of cooperating with authorities or attempting to make restitution for his crimes, he hired expensive criminal defense attorneys and began a campaign to discredit former employees who were cooperating with investigators. His legal team sent threatening letters to several former employees, claiming that their cooperation with federal investigators violated non-disclosure agreements they'd signed during their employment. The intimidation tactics backfired spectacularly when Agent Torres informed Bradley's attorneys that witness intimidation was a federal crime that could result in additional charges. The building security footage from the day of my firing became crucial evidence in the federal case. The recording captured Bradley's public humiliation tactics and his erratic behavior in the hours following our mass departure. Federal prosecutors plan to use the footage to demonstrate Bradley's consciousness of guilt and his pattern of retaliating against employees who threatened his criminal enterprise. TechFlow's stock price collapsed as news of the federal investigation became public. The company's board of directors demanded Bradley's immediate resignation, but he refused to step down voluntarily. His determination to maintain control created additional chaos as board members resigned in protest and investors filed lawsuits claiming securities fraud. The broader technology community rallied around Sterling Solutions and the other businesses formed by former TechFlow employees. Professional associations featured our story in newsletters and conference presentations as an example of how ethical leadership could triumph over corporate corruption. Local news outlets began following our progress as a human interest story that balanced the negative coverage of TechFlow's criminal activities. Our success demonstrated that employees who stood up for their principles could build thriving businesses based on integrity and excellence. 3 months after my firing, Sterling Solutions employed 15 people and was generating over $75,000 in monthly revenue. Our client base included government contractors, private corporations, and nonprofit organizations that specifically sought our services because of our reputation for ethical business practices. The financial success was gratifying, but the cultural impact felt even more meaningful. We'd created a workplace environment where employees felt comfortable raising concerns about irregular practices, where client relationships were built on honesty rather than deception, and where professional growth was encouraged rather than suppressed. Victoria Chen became not just a client, but a mentor who provided guidance about scaling business operations while maintaining ethical standards. Her experience managing a billion-dollar company offered valuable insights about sustainable growth strategies and stakeholder relationship management. The contrast between Sterling Solutions and TechFlow became more stark with each passing day. While we were expanding our client base and hiring talented professionals, Bradley's company continued losing employees' contracts and credibility. Federal investigators were preparing criminal charges that could result in decades of prison time for him and his co-conspirators. My role as a protected witness in the federal investigation continued providing valuable insights about corporate fraud detection and prevention. Legal experts began consulting with me about best practices for encouraging whistleblower cooperation and protecting employees who report criminal activities. By the end of our first quarter of operations, Sterling Solutions had become a case study in how principled business leadership could create opportunities that exceeded anything possible within corrupt organizations. Our success validated the difficult decisions we'd made and proved that integrity was not just morally correct, but also financially profitable. 3 months after my public firing, the federal investigation reached its climax in ways that exceeded even Agent Torres's most optimistic projections. The evidence against Bradley had become overwhelming, but his desperate attempts to avoid prosecution created opportunities for him to incriminate himself further through increasingly reckless decisions. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing contract proposals in Sterling Solutions' conference room. Bradley's voice on the phone sounded strained and panicky, completely different from the authoritative tone he'd used to humiliate me in front of 60 employees. "Rose, I need to speak with you immediately," Bradley began. His words rushed and slightly slurred. "This entire situation has gotten completely out of hand. Federal investigators are twisting everything out of proportion and making mountains out of molehills." His attempt to minimize the seriousness of charges, including fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice, was almost laughable. The evidence documented deliberate criminal activities spanning multiple years and involving millions of dollars in stolen government funds. "I'm willing to make this worth your while." Bradley continued, his desperation becoming more obvious with each sentence. $5 million deposited in any account you specify, plus a position as Chief Executive Officer of TechFlow when this investigation concludes. All you need to do is clarify that your testimony might have been influenced by your anger about being fired. The bribery attempt was so blatant and stupid that I wondered if Bradley had been drinking or taking medication that impaired his judgment. Any reasonable person would understand that attempting to buy witnesses in a federal investigation was itself a serious crime that could result in additional charges. "You built a great team at TechFlow," Bradley rambled, apparently misinterpreting my silence as consideration rather than shock. "I made mistakes in how I handled your departure, but business disagreements shouldn't destroy people's lives and careers. We can work together to resolve this situation in ways that benefit everyone involved." His revisionist interpretation of events was stunning. My firing hadn't been a business disagreement. It had been his panicked response to my questions about criminal activities he'd been concealing. The federal investigation hadn't been triggered by workplace disputes. It had been the inevitable result of systematic fraud that couldn't be hidden indefinitely. Following Agent Torres's previous instructions about documenting any contact attempts from TechFlow leadership, I was recording the conversation through an app on my phone. Bradley's bribery offer was being captured in his own voice, providing federal prosecutors with additional evidence of obstruction and witness tampering. "I understand you might need time to consider this opportunity," Bradley concluded. "But federal investigators are pressuring everyone to say things that aren't entirely accurate. Sometimes people remember events differently under stress, and initial statements can be clarified or corrected through additional testimony." After ending the call, I immediately contacted Agent Torres and forwarded the audio recording. His reaction was immediate and decisive. Federal prosecutors would use Bradley's bribery attempt to request additional charges and demonstrate his ongoing efforts to obstruct their investigation. "This recording provides definitive proof of consciousness of guilt," Agent Torres explained. "Innocent executives don't offer $5 million to witnesses in federal investigations. Bradley's attempted bribery shows that he understands the strength of the evidence against him and is willing to commit additional crimes to avoid prosecution." The following morning brought developments that transformed Bradley's desperate gambit into the final nail in his legal coffin. Federal agents arrived at TechFlow's headquarters with arrest warrants and search orders, executing a coordinated operation that had been planned for weeks, but accelerated by his witness tampering attempt. News cameras captured Bradley's perp walk as federal agents escorted him from his corner office in handcuffs. His expensive suit and confident demeanor from the day he'd fired me had been replaced by prison clothing and an expression of defeat that reflected his complete loss of control over the situation he'd created. The arrest warrant detailed charges including conspiracy to defraud the government, tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering, and witness tampering. The maximum possible sentence exceeded 20 years in federal prison, and the strength of the evidence made plea bargaining unlikely to result in significantly reduced penalties. From Sterling Solutions' office windows, we could see news helicopters circling above TechFlow's building as federal agents carried boxes of evidence to waiting vehicles. The visual symbolism was powerful. While Bradley's criminal empire was being dismantled by law enforcement, our ethical business was thriving just 6 blocks away. Local television stations provided live coverage of the arrest throughout the day, featuring interviews with former employees who described the toxic workplace culture that had enabled Bradley's criminal activities. The news reports portrayed our mass resignation as the catalyst that had given other employees courage to cooperate with federal investigators. That afternoon, Victoria Chen called with news that added another dramatic element to Bradley's downfall. Morrison Industries was finalizing a 5-year exclusive partnership with Sterling Solutions worth $50 million. The contract would make us the primary technology consultants for all of Morrison's government contracting projects. Your team's integrity and technical expertise have impressed everyone at Morrison Industries, Victoria explained. We want to establish a long-term relationship that recognizes your value while supporting your company's continued growth. The partnership offer exceeded my most ambitious projections for Sterling Solutions development. Victoria was essentially guaranteeing our financial success while providing opportunities to work on prestigious projects that would enhance our professional reputation throughout the government contracting industry. Bradley's arrest created chaos at TechFlow as remaining employees struggled to manage client relationships and ongoing projects without leadership or direction. Several major contracts were terminated as clients lost confidence in the company's ability to deliver services, while its executives faced federal prosecution. The bankruptcy filing came 3 days after Bradley's arrest. TechFlow Solutions, which had generated over $30 million in annual revenue just 6 months earlier, was forced to liquidate assets and close operations permanently. The collapse eliminated nearly 200 jobs and left dozens of client projects incomplete. Local business organizations used TechFlow's downfall as a case study in how corporate corruption ultimately destroys value for shareholders, employees, and clients. Professional associations featured our story as an example of how ethical leadership could create sustainable success, while criminal behavior inevitably led to complete organizational failure. The personal satisfaction of watching Bradley face consequences for his actions was profound but complicated. While justice was being served, the human cost of his crimes extended far beyond his own punishment. Hundreds of people had lost jobs, clients had been defrauded, and the technology community's reputation had been damaged by his criminal activities. That evening, as I watched news coverage of Bradley's first court appearance, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred since my public firing. His attempt to humiliate and silence me had ultimately positioned me as the key witness who helped bring him to justice while building a business that embodied everything his company had failed to represent. The final confrontation between Bradley and the consequences of his actions had been decided not through corporate politics or financial manipulation, but through the fundamental principle that integrity and truth ultimately triumph over corruption and deception. 6 months after Bradley Whitman's public humiliation of me on the TechFlow Solutions office floor, I found myself standing before a congressional subcommittee in Washington, D.C., testifying about corporate fraud prevention and whistleblower protection. The transformation from silenced employee to national advocate for business ethics felt surreal, but it represented the natural evolution of everything that had begun with my firing. The hearing room was packed with corporate executives, federal investigators, legal experts, and journalists covering congressional efforts to strengthen laws protecting employees who report criminal activities. My testimony focused on how workplace retaliation against ethical employees created environments where fraud could flourish unchecked. The most dangerous aspect of corporate corruption isn't the initial crime, I explained to the committee members. It's the culture of silence that develops when employees learn that asking uncomfortable questions leads to punishment rather than investigation. Congressman Williams, the subcommittee chairman, asked me to describe how ordinary employees could recognize signs of criminal activity in their workplaces. My response drew from lessons learned through the TechFlow investigation and conversations with other whistleblowers who had faced similar retaliation. Financial irregularities often start small and escalate gradually, I testified. Employees notice billing discrepancies, unusual accounting practices, or pressure to falsify documentation, but they're told these concerns are above their pay grade or outside their area of responsibility. The congressional hearing was being broadcast live on C-SPAN, and several news outlets featured my testimony in their coverage of corporate accountability legislation. The national exposure created opportunities to discuss business ethics and employee protection that extended far beyond the TechFlow case. Sterling Solutions had grown exponentially since our modest beginning in that downtown office space. We now employed 38 people, including most of my former TechFlow colleagues, who had found new purpose in building an organization based on integrity rather than profit maximization at any cost. James had become our chief technology officer, leading software development teams that consistently delivered projects ahead of schedule and under budget. His experience with Bradley's impossible deadlines had taught him how to create realistic timelines that protected both employee well-being and client relationships. Sarah served as our data analysis director, using her skills to help clients identify inefficiencies and fraudulent activities in their own operations. Her work with federal investigators had given her expertise in recognizing patterns that indicated criminal behavior or regulatory violations. Marcus led our project management division, applying lessons learned from TechFlow's chaotic operations to develop systematic approaches that ensured clear communication and accountability at every stage of client engagement. Diana headed our quality assurance department, establishing testing protocols that exceeded industry standards while maintaining efficiency and cost-effectiveness. Her commitment to excellence had been suppressed at TechFlow, but flourished in an environment that valued thoroughness over speed. Trevor managed our marketing and client relations, developing promotional strategies that emphasized our ethical practices and commitment to long-term relationships over short-term profit maximization. His experience with Bradley's deceptive marketing had motivated him to pioneer transparent communication approaches. Patricia directed our customer success operations, ensuring that client needs were met through honest assessment of capabilities rather than overpromising and underdelivering. Her decades of experience in client relations had taught her that sustainable business relationships required mutual respect and realistic expectations. Amber had evolved from junior developer to innovation team leader, spearheading research into emerging technologies that could benefit our clients. Her enthusiasm for ethical business practices inspired newer employees and demonstrated how integrity could coexist with ambitious professional goals. The Sterling Foundation, established 6 months after our company's founding, provided legal support and financial assistance for employees facing retaliation for reporting corporate misconduct. We'd already helped 12 whistleblowers navigate federal investigations while protecting their careers and family security. Bradley's legal proceedings had concluded with a 7-year federal prison sentence for fraud, tax evasion, and obstruction of justice. The judge's sentencing statement emphasized that corporate executives who abuse their positions of trust deserve punishment that reflects the seriousness of their crimes and deters similar behavior by others. TechFlow Solutions' bankruptcy had eliminated nearly 200 jobs and cost clients millions of dollars in incomplete projects and recovery expenses. The human impact of Bradley's crimes extended far beyond his personal punishment, affecting families and businesses throughout our community. The contrast between TechFlow's destruction and Sterling Solutions' success had become a case study taught in business schools across the country. Universities used our story to illustrate how ethical leadership created sustainable value, while criminal behavior inevitably led to complete organizational collapse. Several publishing companies had approached me about writing a book describing my experience and offering guidance for employees who suspected criminal activities in their workplaces. The project would combine personal narrative with practical advice about document preservation, legal protection, and federal cooperation procedures. Speaking engagements at business conferences and professional associations had become a regular part of my schedule. Corporate audiences were eager to learn how to create cultures that encouraged ethical behavior and prevented the development of criminal enterprises within their organizations. The financial success of Sterling Solutions exceeded every projection I'd made during my most optimistic planning sessions. Our annual revenue approached $8 million, and our client waiting list extended 6 months into the future. The growth had been built on principles that directly contradicted everything Bradley had represented. Victoria Chen remained not just a client, but a mentor and friend whose guidance had been crucial to our sustainable growth strategies. Her experience managing a billion-dollar corporation while maintaining ethical standards provided a model for how Sterling Solutions could continue expanding without compromising our values. The personal transformation felt even more significant than the professional success. Bradley's attempt to humiliate me had revealed inner strength and leadership capabilities I hadn't fully recognized while working under his dysfunctional management style. The woman who had smiled and said thank you while being publicly fired had discovered that integrity under pressure could create opportunities that exceeded anything possible through compromise or silence. The experience had taught me that standing up for principles wasn't just morally correct, but also practically effective. Late at night, when I reviewed Sterling Solutions' financial reports and employee satisfaction surveys, I often reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with my public firing. Bradley's attempt to destroy my career had actually launched me into a position of influence and authority that I never could have achieved while working within his corrupt organization. The transformation from victim to advocate had required courage, patience, and support from people who believed that justice was more important than convenience. The outcome had vindicated everyone who chose integrity over security and demonstrated that ethical behavior ultimately created better outcomes for everyone involved. My story had become evidence that corporate corruption could be defeated by employees who were willing to ask difficult questions, document irregular practices, and cooperate with authorities who had the power to hold criminals accountable. The lesson resonated far beyond the technology industry and offered hope for anyone facing similar challenges in their own workplace. As I prepared for my next congressional hearing on corporate accountability legislation, I realized that Bradley's public humiliation of me had been the catalyst for a transformation that extended far beyond personal vindication. His attempt to silence one employee had instead amplified voices calling for business practices that prioritized integrity, transparency, and respect for the law. The journey from that humiliating moment on TechFlow's office floor to testifying before Congress about corporate ethics had been challenging, frightening, and ultimately transformative. The experience had proven that individual courage could create changes that benefited entire communities and industries. Sterling Solutions continued growing because clients valued working with people who had demonstrated real commitment to ethical practices under pressure. Our success proved that businesses built on integrity could compete effectively against organizations willing to cut corners or break laws for short-term advantage. The Sterling Foundation's work with other whistleblowers had shown that my experience wasn't unique. Across industries and geographic regions, employees were discovering criminal activities and facing retaliation for trying to report them. Our support services helped them navigate federal investigations while protecting their careers and financial security. 6 months after my firing, the question wasn't whether Bradley's attempt to humiliate me had backfired. The question was whether other corporate executives would learn from his example and recognize that ethical leadership created sustainable success while criminal behavior inevitably led to complete destruction. The answer to that question would determine whether the transformation that began with my public firing would inspire broader changes in how American businesses balanced profit maximization with legal compliance and ethical responsibility. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where standing up for what's right seemed impossible, but you knew in your heart it was the only choice you could live with? I'd love to hear about moments when you chose integrity over convenience, even when it seemed like the harder path. Your stories of courage inspire others to find their own strength when facing difficult decisions. Thank you for joining me on this journey from public humiliation to personal triumph. Remember that sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually preparing us for the best chapters we haven't written yet. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never underestimate the power of saying thank you and walking away with your dignity intact. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it when they need encouragement to do the right thing. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary strength in challenging situations. Share this video with anyone who might be facing their own difficult workplace decisions. And comment below with your own experiences of choosing integrity over security. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Until next time, remember that your character is defined not by what happens to you, but by how you respond when everything seems to be falling apart.